On the fifth day, Rayhana's sponsor sent his proposal to her through his Pakistani pimp, Sabir Ibrahim Shah. Out of fear for her life and due to her strong belief that she was pregnant, Rayhana consented to become the secret mistress to a man who was 43 years older than her. She was petrified when she saw the old Saudi again. She was afraid he might jump on her at any moment and rape her because she was, for all wants and purposes, his. Not in the know, the odd behavior of the family puzzled Rayhana. Everyone she met in that house turned out to be abnormal and amoral. She was troubled by the unnatural behavior of the two sons who managed to enter the washroom and videotape her naked. She was under the impression that the two sons somehow entered the women's washroom, hid themselves, and shot the video. She was also baffled by the sexual intercourse she witnessed between Mrs. Ahmed and the Pakistani chauffeur. She was puzzled as to why the wife of the old man wasn't satisfied with her husband. Why did she need a servant for sex? Lastly, Rayhana was really confused by Sheikh Ahmed's desire for her. Why was he not content with his 4 wives? She had already learned through Sabir that Sheikh Ahmed had 4 wives and every day he visited one each night of the week to perform his husbandly duties. Rayhana asked herself, why did the old Saudi want or need a maidservant for sex? She was puzzled by the sexual prowess and strength of such a man. How could he manage to have sex every night with a different woman and still want another one? Did he bring her all the way from India to his country for sex? While Rayhana was wrapping her extremely naive and unsophisticated mind around these things and trying to understand what it all meant, the Pakistani chauffeur came to her in the kitchen and told her something that confused her even more. The report from Sheikh Ahmed suggested that she and he get married on paper. As she listened to his explanation, it made no sense to her whatsoever. She vividly remembered that Aslam Ali Khan convinced her to marry him on paper out of fear that his neighbors would report him to the police. So it was doubly perplexing to her, that now she was to be married to the chauffeur of her sponsor, on paper. Sabir Shah told Rayhana Khan that Sheikh Ahmed had to deal with his wife's insisting demand that he kick out the new maidservant because she might corrupt her sons. The chauffeur revealed her sponsor knew full well that his wife's rantings were justified on the grounds the new Indian maidservant was young and beautiful and possessed a very irresistible body. For that reason, her sponsor thought that if the maidservant agreed to marry the chauffeur on paper, his wife would have peace of mind. The wife would then be satisfied knowing that her sons would understand the maidservant was now married with a husband to protect her and therefore they would not come near her. Rayhana did not like the idea at first, but when she heard that the chauffeur would protect her from the 2 evil sons, she changed her mind and once again said Kabul. Sheikh Ahmed used to spend only 1 day with his 4th wife, but for reasons known only to himself, he decided to spend 3 days with wife number 4. When wife number 4 asked him about why he was spending more days at her residence, his reply was that he was not feeling well and needed to take some rest until he recovered. The ignoble woman did not like that her husband was spending all this time at her house. She knew it didn't matter really how many days he stayed at the residence because he wasn't going to touch her anyway. Try as she might, she could not remember the last time her husband actually had sex with her. It had been years. For that reason, she went for the handsome, young Pakistani, Sabir Shah, to satisfy her needs. She was 15 years older than her secret lover and 25 years younger than her husband. When the 2 servants agreed to marry, Sabir Ibrahim Shah was 30 years old and Rayhana Khan was 27 years old. That day, Sheikh Ahmed sent his Pakistani chauffeur to request the presence of his Indian maidservant to have her come into the living room. Rayhana left the kitchen and walked into the living room. The old Saudi told the chauffeur in front of his wife to take the new maidservant to the super mall and have her purchase a total of 7 dresses, 4 for Rayhana and 3 for Ifat. They should also purchase inner garments and 3 pairs of shoes each. The kind sponsor ordered that when little Ifat returned from school, she should have at least 3 beautiful new Barbie dolls in her room. When Sheikh Ahmed extended his wonderful generosity towards his maidservant and her little daughter, his noble wife was sitting near him in the living room. The ignoble wife was careful not to let it be known the fact that she had already bought clothes and dolls for the maidservant and her daughter. She kept silent and offered no objections. What troubled her heart more was seeing her secret lover going out with the young and beautiful maidservant. She was afraid they might get along a little too well. It would seem Sheikh Ahmed had immediate plans for the young maidservant and chauffeur. He had already phoned many places and made many preparations for the pseudo-marriage between Rayhana and Sabir. He had told Sabir some of the details of his scheme but hid many other details from him. He decided to keep the marriage of his two young servants a surprise from his wife and their two sons. Rayhana had technically given her Kabul the previous day, but Sheikh Ahmed decided not to rush things and be prudent. He could have crept into the room of his beloved, for she had already agreed to surrender herself to him, but he controlled his lustful inclinations and decided to wait until everything was done properly. He knew it was only a matter of a few short hours before his Layla was going to be his and his alone. He would then have her to possess forever. He had to admit that he had never enjoyed such a dreamy, peaceful, good night's sleep in all his life until after his Layla had said to him, "Kabul." Following the orders of his master, the chauffeur took Rayhana first to a private clinic. It was owned and run by a corrupt medical Pakistani doctor. Sheikh Ahmed had told Sabir that he met Rayhana by chance while she was roaming the streets of Kolaba in Bombay. He was scared Rayhana might be a prostitute and carrying some dangerous sexually transmitted disease such as AIDS. For that reason, before he would sleep with her, he wanted to make sure that she was not carrying any infectious disease. Accordingly, before conducting the paper marriage, Sabir was to take Rayhana to the Pakistani doctor for a thorough medical checkup. On the other hand, the story he told Rayhana was that the law in Saudi Arabia requires every couple to go through a medical checkup before they were to get married. In the interests of keeping that facade, Sheikh Ahmed told his chauffeur to undergo a checkup too. In that way, Rayhana would not be suspicious of his intentions. Of course, that was just what the old Saudi told his Pakistani driver. The Pakistani doctor had received a totally different set of instructions as far as the chauffeur was concerned. First, he knew very well that Rayhana wasn't a prostitute. She refused to give him her body even though he offered to pay her thousands of rupees. Secondly, he told the corrupt Pakistani doctor to put Sabir to sleep and castrate him. Thirdly, regarding his Indian maidservant, he strictly warned him not to expose her nakedness or even touch her body. He demanded one of his female nurses check Rayhana for any possible disease. If need be, the nurse should treat her ailments, if any. When the soon-to-be married couple arrived at the clinic, the Pakistani doctor kept up the charade and promptly sedated the Pakistani chauffeur. He then castrated him under a general anesthesia. When Sabir gained consciousness, he felt a dull ache in his privates, never suspecting what had transpired. Rayhana underwent a full-body checkup and blood work, performed by a female nurse. All tests were negative. After her checkup, Rayhana had to wait a long time for the chauffeur to rejoin her. She felt a great relief when Sabir finally appeared, but was curious why his checkup took so much longer than hers. Having no knowledge or reason to question the procedures at the clinic, she did not bother to find out the reason for the delay from him or the clinic. Immediately after the clinic appointment, the two servants went to the appointed Pakistani religious Mazun and asked him to conduct their marriage. As soon as she laid eyes on the Mazun, Rayhana recognized his face. He was the very same man who came to the apartment of Aslam Ali Khan and conducted her pseudo-marriage. The Mazun did not fail to recognize Rayhana, but minding his own business, he did not say anything to her. He photographed them with his little camera and then conducted their marriage contract. After receiving his fees, he issued their marriage certificate and handed it over to the two newlyweds. Rayhana, in yielding to the complicated situation, kept mum. After the civil ceremony, the couple was free to leave the Mazun's place of business and Sabir took his on-paper bride to the super mall. Sheikh Ahmed had already phoned a boutique and placed his order for a beautiful wedding gown for his kept wife and a dashing suit for his Pakistani pimp. The eccentric lover wanted to see his Layla in her wedding gown so that he could enjoy his first wedding night with her. His dream was at last coming true. He had already lost her twice before. The first time he lost her was when she was jailed for many months in a Bombay prison cell, and the second time when he thought that she had been raped and murdered and her body dumped somewhere in the sands of the Saudi Arabian desert. But now, after his Allah had resurrected her from the desert plains and given her to him on a silver platter at the beautiful Filipino women's salon, the old Saudi had a conviction that no power on earth could snatch her from his hands again. In his mind, she had come into his house, agreed to be his kept wife, and destined for him and him alone. The crazy Kays even concluded that not even his Allah could separate him from his Layla again. Sheikh Ahmed had given his chauffeur a secret password. He told him not to bring his kept wife in her wedding gown to the house until first contacting him on his cell phone and the correct passwords were exchanged. The paper bridegroom was supposed to pick up the phone and say Layla, and as a response, Sheikh Ahmed would return with Kays. This would signal that the coast was clear and they were to enter the dining room without asking for permission. Without the password, they were supposed to stay and wait outside the dining room until Sheikh Ahmed phoned them back. The Sheikh's strange behavior did not escape Mrs. Ahmed's observation. She had no idea what the evil genius had for her in store. Although he claimed to be ill, he looked well and happy. He was cracking jokes and showing so much affection towards her. He even came in the kitchen and helped her while she was cooking lunch. When the lunch was prepared, he was the one who carried the tray into the dining room. While the joyful old geezer was sitting at the dining table surrounded by his wife and 2 sons, his cell phone began to ring. He took his cell phone out of his pocket and glanced at the caller ID. He raised his voice and shouted a greeting. Then, he shouted even louder and said Kays. After that, he cut off the phone and replaced it in his pocket. His wife and sons did not know what to make of this brief exchange. His son Hisham asked him, "Who is Kays?" "My beloved sons and my dear wife, today I have a great surprise for you. I am sure it is going to make each one of you very happy." Before his beloved sons and dear wife were able to demand an explanation about this great surprise, the door of the dining room was thrust open and the incredible surprise walked in. The 2 sons already considered Rayhana gorgeous, but clad in her wedding gown, they thought a virgin of paradise had descended from heaven and appeared in human form before their very eyes. They stood up, mouths agape without uttering a single word. Mrs. Ahmed had a totally different set of emotions boiling inside her, when she saw the newly wedded couple. She felt the urge to pick up the knife from the dining room table and run Rayhana through for having the audacity to marry her secret lover. Every passing second did nothing to quell the rising flame ripping her heart into pieces. If anyone had touched her at that critical moment, she would have exploded for sure. As fate would have it, it was the hand of her husband who touched her at that very instant. What followed was the loudest, angriest filth anyone had ever heard coming out of her mouth. Her husband did not reprimand her physically. Instead, he requested the newly married couple occupy 2 chairs near her and have lunch with the noble family. Before she could do or say anything, the 2 servants sat down and occupied their seats. Rayhana sat beside her, carefully arranging her beautiful wedding gown around her when it touched the woman of the house. That was the feather that broke the camel's back. She used both her hands to push Rayhana and her gown far away from her, and the shove made the new bride plop down on the floor right next to her chair. Then, with the fury that followed, she opened her mouth wide open and shouted, "How dare you come sit with us, you stupid Indian slave!" Rayhana shot up on her feet and fled for her life. Sabir stood up and began to tremble from head to toe. "You stupid Pakistani Kolam, how dare you marry that dirty Indian servant without asking my permission?" "I gave them permission to get married, Mastera," shouted Sheikh Ahmed. She has come here to serve us, not to get married and have a honeymoon. She is our servant and not our slave. We cannot decide for her when she can marry or to whom. Okay, go and book her a room in a 5-star hotel and let her enjoy her honeymoon there. I don't want to see her any more in this house. Mastera, calm down. Remember, I am the one who brought her to work for you. I could have sent her to any of the other 3 wives, but you said you needed a maidservant. I don't want her. I will do all the housework by myself. Send her wherever you want to send her. I don't care. Except she's not staying here. No, you cannot order me. Rayhana is going to stay with her husband Sabir and work in this house. Yes, mother, let her stay. She is a very good housekeeper and very nice lady. We like the way she cleaned our rooms better than those other maidservants. She does very good work here and we're very happy with her, said Hisham. Yes, Rayhana is our beloved sister and we love her so much. She shouldn't go to any other house, said Husam. Feeling the walls closing in on her, Mrs. Ahmed got up from her chair and marched straight toward her bedroom. The sound of slamming doors followed. Immediately Sheikh Ahmed stood up and asked his chauffeur to follow him to the kitchen. When he entered the kitchen, he found Rayhana sitting in a corner, crying. He sat beside her and embraced her dearly. It felt so good, for he had never touched his Layla so tenderly before. If it wasn't for his 2 sons who came running in behind the chauffeur, he would have kissed her on her lips and more than likely consummated his marriage right there on the kitchen floor.